Welcome to the Collide Kids Podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids Podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids Podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. It means so much to me that you are listening today. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. If this is your first time listening, I just want to say welcome. I'm glad you're here. Be sure to listen to the end of every episode. That's where we have the kids only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. Well, since it is the end of October, I thought it would be fun for us to play a little game called Trick or Treat. Now, this is not the type of trick or treat where you might go to someone's store dressed in a fun costume and get some candy. Trick or treat stands for true or false. So I'm going to read a fun fact about pumpkins, and then you tell me if it's a trick, which is false, or a treat, which is true. So here is our first fact. You tell me, trick or treat. A pumpkin is a vegetable. Is that a trick or a treat? A pumpkin is a vegetable. Is that true or false? Well, if you chose trick, you are correct. A pumpkin is actually a fruit. Most people assume it is a vegetable. Okay, here's your next one. Pumpkins are 90% water. Pumpkins are 90% water. Is that a trick or treat? Well, if you chose treat, you're correct. A pumpkin is made up of 90% water. Isn't that amazing? Okay, here's the next one. Pumpkins were once recommended as a cure for freckles. Is that a trick or a treat? It's a treat. You are right. I don't know if it really worked, but I think freckles are great. I don't think you should cure them. I think you should keep them. All right, here's the next one. The best time of year to plant a pumpkin seed is the end of October. Is that a trick or a treat? It's a trick. You're right. That's false. It's actually the end of May or early June. That's the best time. I was trying to trick you guys, but you got it. Okay, here's our next fact. The state that grows the most pumpkins is Florida. Is that a trick or a treat? What do you think? Well, if you chose trick, you're correct. It's actually Illinois. Interesting. Okay, just got two more. Here we go. In the ingredients for pumpkin spice, pumpkin is not listed as an ingredient. Is that a trick or a treat? Well, if you chose treat, you are correct. Pumpkin spice is made up of cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, and is a great way to spice up your pie or latte, but it doesn't have any pumpkin in it. Okay, here's the last one. Pumpkins are white before they turn orange. Pumpkins are white before they turn orange. Is that a trick or a treat? Well, if you chose trick, you are correct. They're actually green and then they turn orange. Isn't that interesting? Well, I love playing games with you guys, and I am so excited about our next guest who has nothing to do with pumpkins or trick-or-treating. She's a good friend of mine who is the host of the wonderful podcast Java with Jen, where she normalizes learning how to hear God's voice for her Christian audience in a let your hair down, authentic, and encouraging way. She has a globally top-ranked podcast program that is listened to in over 87 countries and counting. She is also the CEO of Jenilee Samuel Styling, where she helps women locally redefine their style and learn to love their body just the way it is built by learning to dress in a way that flatters and builds their confidence. Jenilee loves to spend her time running her podcast, coaching other aspiring podcasters into creating their own show, and managing the Imagine Media Podcast Network alongside raising her 4 teen boys and pastoring with her husband. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation all about fashion and clothes with my friend Jenilee Samuel. Well, Jenilee, I am so excited to have you on the Collide Kids podcast today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is so fun. We have been podcast friends for a really long time, and I was on your show a couple years ago. I think it's been a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah, but I'm really glad to have you on the show today. Would you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Okay. So I'm Jenilee Samuel. I have 4 boys. They are ages 11, 13, 15, and 17. So one is about to leave the nest. My husband and I are pastors, but I am also a podcaster. I train podcasters, and then I have a background in fashion as well. I have a wardrobe styling business that I ran for a number of years. I've styled over 9,000 people. And so that was something the Lord kind of pulled me into for a season. I'm not really doing it much right now, but anytime that it's asked of me, I'm like, sure, let's go play dress up. I love to.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Well, this is really exciting because I want to talk to you about fashion today because I feel like that's something I haven't had on my show before is someone to talk about that. And I think it's something that kids and families can get behind. So I think this would be a really interesting conversation. But before we do that, because this is a show for kids, I always ask my guests to tell me a joke. So do you have a joke for us today?
I do. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Owls.
Owls who?
Yes, they do.
That's a good one. Owls who? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. That's awesome. I love that. And this episode comes out just a little bit before Halloween. And so we have an owl in our yard. And especially when it gets darker, he likes to make a lot of noise. So,
Oh. How big is he? They're pretty big.
well, we've only seen him a couple of times and it was years ago, but we always hear him. So we know he's around. We have lots of animals in our yard. So let's talk about fashion because I think this is such an interesting thing that I've seen this in your life and things you posted about and how you use this to serve God. And you talked about like God called you into that. So talk to me a little bit about that because I'd love for our listeners to understand about fashion and what that means.
Yeah, totally. So fashion is something I say I like it in that I didn't study fashion. I was not allowed to look at fashion magazines when I was growing up. So I never had like Teen Vogue or any of those magazines because my mom was trying to keep us from having an identity complex, which I'm grateful for. But I always liked the movies where the girls had cute outfits or I remember one girl in high school, it felt like she wore something new and cute every single day of her life. And so I secretly really admired her style, but I didn't have good style. Growing up, I lived on hand-me-downs and we shopped at the thrift store. We just did not have a lot of money. My mom told me the other day that our family of 6 lived on $900 a month. Like that's what we survived on. So I never got to buy clothes or do anything like that. And so when I became a mom and I had kids back to back to back to back, my body was changing a whole lot. And I just remember everybody kind of talked like once you start having kids, you kind of lose yourself and you gain weight and you become sloppy looking. You know, that's kind of like what's
Who's trying to survive.
I know, right? And so I just remember when I had my first kid, I was still pretty young. I was like 22. And so I just didn't feel like I was ready to lose myself because I was still finding myself, you know. And so I just decided, you know, I may not have a lot of money to work with because even married, we were in ministry, so we didn't have a lot of money to work with either. And I just decided, you know, I don't have to be rich to look nice. And I don't have to look bad just because I've been pregnant. And so I was like, I'm going to find ways to look nice on a budget. And so I just started kind of learning. And then when I was, you know, nursing my kids, I would look on Pinterest for outfit ideas or how to dress my body shape because I figured my body shape needed to be dressed a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so that took me on a journey of learning a whole lot. And then through a number of bizarre circumstances, a lot of dreams and prophetic words from people, they're like, God is saying this to you. And God, I saw this vision and in it, you were wearing this and it meant this, you know, and so a lot of prophetic words and dreams that were built around clothing. And then I would be walking down the street and people would stop me and be like, oh my gosh, your outfit is amazing. Would you dress me? And I'm like, do you know how weird that is that you just asked a perfect stranger to dress you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just all these weird things that happen. And then I think the Lord needed to do that to get my attention because I never would have taken fashion as a serious use of my time. You know what I mean? I never would have considered going in that direction with a career or whatever. So a couple of years later, after all these weird things are happening, I got a friend put it on my radar. She's like, hey, you should work for Stitch Fix. You would be great at it. You're really good at putting outfits together. And I was like, what is Stitch Fix? And it turns out it's this online styling company where you can fill out a form online, and then they have a stylist on the other side who looks at everything, looks at your preferences and your body and all the things. And they put together 5 pieces that could be worn together as an outfit or two. And then the warehouse ships those clothes to you and it shows up on your doorstep. You try everything on. And if it fits, you keep it and pay for it. If it doesn't fit, you put it back in the packaging and you send it back to the warehouse and you don't have to pay for it. So it was pretty awesome. So I became a stylist with them on the back end. So I styled about 8,000 people that way. And it was amazing. And it trained my eye, and it made me realize how much that clothing and the way we dress is really built into how we feel, about our personal sense of self-confidence, about the way we view ourselves and the way we want to show up that day. And so it just made me realize how it's such a key to people's hearts and to even unlocking them. I had a number of clients that I would style that were super insecure, especially when I styled men. I remember one guy, he's like, I'm super insecure of this. And I actually just stay in the house. And so my dating life has really suffered because I'm just really insecure. Can you help me? And so I was like, sure, let's make you look good. So I put together outfits for him for a number of months in a row. And his notes were so appreciative. He would respond back. He's like, I went out and I wore what you gave me and I looked amazing. And I actually asked a girl out on a date and I'm just so excited. And he was like, I feel confident. I feel like I'm starting to love myself more, And so I realized that helping people dress was more about kind of almost helping them find words for how they feel, but with their clothes. It's just been this really cool journey that the Lord's taken me on.
That's really awesome. I love that. And I think you're right. I think clothing is really in a way we express ourselves. And so if you don't feel confident in that and how you express yourself, that's hard. So I feel like when I hear the word fashion, it means I have to wear something really trendy that doesn't necessarily look good on me. It's what everybody else is wearing. I want to make sure that I feel good in it, and I'd rather wear something I like. So what would be your suggestion for that?
Well, I definitely always tell people, dress for your personality for sure. Because if it suits your personality, because you've tried this before where you maybe go and you stay the night at someone's house and you didn't pack clothes, or it was a last minute decision, or your luggage got lost when you're traveling, and so you've got to borrow someone's clothes. And you wear their clothes, and maybe their clothes suit your style and you're like, oh, I feel fabulous. Or maybe they don't. And you're like, I feel like an imposter. I'm pretending to be someone I'm not,
Right.
And so, or even maybe your auntie buys you this big, ugly sweater and you're like, thanks. And it screams not me, And so it makes you feel different. You always need to dress for your personality first. But a lot of people don't realize there's a way to begin to discover how their personality shows up in their clothes, and that there's actually some categories of style that can help you put your personality into your wardrobe. So for example, if someone is really averse, they just don't like super trendy stuff, they like stuff that maybe never goes out of style, that's what you call someone who's a classic dresser. And so there are certain basic pieces that are always in style, like a pair of jeans. Jeans are always going to be in style. Now the cuts might change and the wash might change, but a good old classic pair of jeans are always going to be in style. Or a white blouse. A white blouse will always be necessary in your closet. A black leather jacket will always be necessary in your closet. A denim jacket. So there's different things that maybe certain personalities will migrate towards that shows off their personality. And so my style falls more into the category of edgy. So I like metal details on my clothes, like zippers and studs. I love leather. I like black, but I also like wearing bold colors that really pop. And so there's different ways to pull in elements and little pieces that are trendy. Like maybe if there's all these different trends and you're like, oh, I like that, and I like that. Maybe that color, that style of jeans, and that's cut of a dress. And then you can take the pieces that are trendy that you do like and pull those into what that you already tend to migrate towards.
So I love that it's not about doing everything that everybody's doing, because that's impossible. Trends change so much. And, there's different things that look good on different body types or different people. it might not look good on you. And so if you don't feel confident when you wear it, being trendy is not the goal. So I love that advice, just taking a couple of pieces that fit into what you like to wear.
Yeah. And trendy, to be honest, trendy is kind of one of those categories. So there's technically, I think, up to 9 categories of styles of clothing that people can migrate towards. So one of them would be classic, which is like Audrey Hepburn, Taylor Swift, kind of never goes out of style, real clean, not a lot of prints, solid colors, just classy looking. And so that's the classic dresser. Then you've got romantic, which is maybe lots of florals, lots of lace, lots of ruffles, really kind of a girly vibe, lots of dresses. That's a romantic dresser, usually really feminine personalities like romantic style clothing. And then you've got preppy dressers. Actually, I always think of you when I think of a preppy dresser. I don't know why. But preppy dressers are people who like to look kind of smart in their clothing. So maybe they'll wear plaid or like sweaters with a collared shirt underneath, or just like prints and stuff that look a little more academic, maybe have more structure in their clothing. Sometimes like the nautical striping, like the navy and the white striping is a little more on the preppy side. And then you've got your edgy dressers who are a little more like rock star with the leather, the dark, the metal detailing, stuff like that. And then you have athletic, like athleisure. So people who just love athletic clothing and they just want to wear it all the time. There's a way to do that where it looks really cute. And so that's a whole category in itself. Then you've got a casual dresser for people who just want to be comfortable in their clothes no matter what. But they want to look cute. Usually they're going to tend towards jeans, maybe a cute blouse and a cardigan or something. And so your casual dresser is like your stay-at-home mom. They usually fall in that category to some degree. So there's the different categories. You've got your trendy, which is a little more cutting edge. They're going to be very aware of what's in, usually loud colors, loud prints. And then you've got your boho, which is someone who's maybe hippie-ish, like they've got lots of loose layers, kind of earthy colors. And, so you've probably, now that I'm describing them, you can kind of picture maybe people that wear those kinds of clothes. And so those categories of clothing will play to certain personalities. And so that's how you can kind of learn how to be trendy and trend relevant while keeping true to your personality.
I like that a lot. And I think when you were describing the athleisure, that reminded me of pretty much every boy that I know.
Yes.
They love the athletic clothes. Let's talk about boys for a minute. Do you feel like all the guys are going to fit into these categories, or are there different categories for guys?
There are different categories for guys. To be honest, it's been so long since I've styled guys. I can't totally remember, but I do know some of them is like preppy was one of them. Edgy is one. So there are some crossover. You do have like your classic good old American boy, which is like American Eagle, that style of dressing, and Old Navy. They kind of are more like classic and preppy and casual, kind of all put together. And then, so there's definitely categories for guys, or then you've got your guys who really like to dress up and want to do all the layers and all the accessorizing. Those are your more trend forward guys. So there are categories for them too.
We'll be right back after this. Raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app. I love that. So what is it about fashion that you feel like helps other people? I mean, like not just helps them look good, but in their heart. You said you get to really like connect with the heart of someone when you work with their styling. So how does that work? How do you connect with someone in their heart when you're dealing with fashion?
So we've all had this thing where you go, it's the classic line that every woman does, which she goes into her full closet full of clothing and goes, there's nothing to wear, right? Okay. So I watched this little reel of this little 4-year-old girl who said it right. And she goes, Mommy, I have nothing to wear. And her mom goes, of course you do. You have so many clothes. She goes, no, I have nothing to wear for today, for the person that I want to be today. And she just said it so right. And I was like, that's exactly what we do. And so I feel like by helping people figure out how to dress their body in a way that flatters their body so they can feel good about their body, every body shape has struggles. Even what you would consider the most perfect body shape, there will still be things that they have to work around when they're getting dressed. Maybe their waist is so small that jeans never fit right. Maybe their shoulders are so broad from the muscles that they can't find shirts to fit right.
Mm-hmm.
And so teaching people how to know how to dress their body in a way that honors their body and flatters their body can build in them confidence and help them love themselves so that they're not always wishing they were someone else or looked like someone else or had someone else's body shape. So it can teach you to be content and confident. And so in that regard, it feeds your soul. But then when you learn how to dress for what you're feeling on the inside, because that's everything, it changes how you perform, how you act when you're at work. That's the reason why there's dress codes for certain jobs or for certain schools, because the way we dress actually does impact the way we perform. And there's a scientific word for it called enclosed cognition. And that's the scientific word for how the way you dress impacts your performance. And so they did this scientific experiment, which I think is so fascinating. And they had like 3 classrooms of adults, all about the same age range, the same education level, similar demographic, right? And so they put them in these 3 different classrooms and they had a basic test that they all had to take. Basic, like they could pass it pretty easily. They were all educated enough to pass it. And so in the first classroom, they had hanging in the front of the classroom, they had a white lab coat. And they said, this lab coat is actually a plumber's coat. Look at this plumber's coat and take your test. And so they looked at the coat, took their test. They said, imagine yourself being a plumber. Look at the coat, take the test. And then in the next class, they had the same coat and they said, this is a doctor's lab coat. Look at this coat and imagine yourself being a doctor and take the test. And then in the third group, they actually gave them all their own lab coat. And they said, this is a doctor's lab coat that you are wearing. Imagine yourself being a doctor and take the test. And so in all 3 groups, the groups that were looking at the coat had slightly different scorings, but they were about the same. And then the one that wore the coat, their tests scored significantly higher than the other 2. And the only difference was that they actually wore the coat that made them feel like, I'm a doctor. So they felt more intelligent because of what they were wearing. And so they performed better. And so that is the whole science behind why there's dress codes at school. Like our administration at the school that my husband manages, they said that when they have dress code days, students behave better. But then when they have relaxed dress, they can wear whatever they want. Students actually are a little bit more rebellious. They have a little bit more trouble focusing and stuff like that. And so when you go to work, when you go to school, wearing something that makes you feel smart, makes you feel confident, will actually help you perform better.
That is really interesting. I think that's so cool that they did that. That's awesome. So tell me about your journey with fashion. Like, what is it for you when you're dressed really nice or when you feel like you're wearing something that makes you feel confident? How does that feel? Like, what does that do for you when you're dressed up?
Yeah, I think it's a fine line between doing it because it makes you feel good versus doing it because you're insecure and you are actually trying to cover up your insecurity by pretending. You know what I mean? There's a difference. Yeah. And I think everybody kind of deals with that. And sometimes it just takes care of itself, but you have to make sure that you're comfortable with who you are and that you're just putting on stuff to help almost like share with the world who you are rather than pretending to be someone that you're not so that the world will like you better, right? Yeah. There's a difference. And so for me, I like to feel cute. I like to feel put together. I respect myself and I like myself. And so I feel like when I'm sloppy and I just look like I rolled out of bed, I feel like it just sends the message to the world that I don't respect myself very much or that I don't take care of myself. And so I find that I don't feel as ready for the day or as ready to bring my best self to the day until I'm a little bit, even if it's a little bit, even if it's just a little bit of hygiene and a little bit of something to look more put together, it just makes me feel better. And so when I travel, I intentionally dress a little bit nicer. I wear shoes I can walk all over the place in, of course, but I dress a little bit nicer because I've noticed that people treat me better and that people show me a little more respect when I'm dressed nicely. And so it just makes life a little bit easier. Maybe not in the morning when you're getting ready, but it does make life easier when you're dealing with people.
Yeah. I am not good at picking out clothes in advance. Like when we're going on a trip, I will try to like lay out like, okay, here's the things I'm going to wear for this day or this activity or whatever. And then I end up mixing it all up because for me, it's kind of like that 4-year-old you were talking about earlier that I want to dress for the person I want to be today. And so I like to like throw some things together. I don't know if that makes me unorganized or just
Normal.
too artistic for myself.
Yeah, normal.
Yeah, that's normal. Okay, good. I'm glad to know I'm normal. But yeah, I think that's so good to know. Like, it's really important that you feel good in what you're wearing. So if you're wearing something that's too tight or something that doesn't make you comfortable, or you feel like you're just wearing it because other people want you to wear it versus wearing it for yourself, I think that's more important.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize because I feel like even in the church, like the Christian church, I feel like we've almost demonized clothing as being materialistic or wanting to look nice as being materialistic, where it's vanity. You shouldn't do that. But if you notice, like when I started in fashion, and I'm a pastor by trade, right? And so when the Lord was calling me into fashion, I was like, God, I need to know that there's a purpose in this because I'm not putting my life into something that's just vanity when I could be preaching the gospel, you know?
Yeah.
And so as I searched the word, I realized there is nowhere in scripture where God's heart demonstrates that he does not like fashion or that we should not care about it. In fact, as I read the word, the only thing I saw was that God cares a lot about it. And part of us having an identity in him is that we love ourselves and care for ourselves enough that we dress nicely. So like there's a passage in the Old Testament, it's an analogy where this baby was found and it's an unwanted baby. And so the master comes along and says, I'm going to take care of this baby, and picks it up, cleans it up, and begins to grow the child into a woman. And the analogy is that this is God who came for us, that we were uncared for, unloved, and he cared for us enough to clean us up, put us back together. And then part of the story, and that showed how much he loved this child, that had grown into a woman, was it said, I clothed her in fine linens and gave her beautiful garments to wear. I put rings on her fingers and ring in her nose, and she was beautiful. And so the fact that God loved and valued this person, part of how he showed that was I dressed her nicely so the world could see she was well loved, she was well taken care of. And so there's lots of places in scripture that implicate like, hey, I take you seriously. You need to dress like I take you seriously because you need to take you seriously. And so that began to show me, I mean, God had a specific wardrobe for the priests because they went into the Holy of Holies. They had to wear very special garments. There's another story that says, you know, like you come for the bridegroom or you come to the wedding, but some people weren't allowed in because they didn't have wedding garments, which that's an analogy, of course, but still it was speaking to the significance of clothing. The Proverbs 31 woman, she worked with her hands to create fine linens for her children. And it was attributed to her as a quality of taking care of her home, that her children had fine clothes and she never had to worry for them. And so clothing speaks to status in some way, but not status in a keeping up with the Joneses way, but status in that I am a valuable human. I care about myself. And so I'm going to take care of myself by wearing nice clothing that tells the world I care about myself.
Absolutely. My mom used to always say, you're dressed like you look like somebody loves you. So like, you know, she'll say, you need to go get your hair cut or you need to go change your outfit because you don't look like anybody loves you if you wear that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
And that's kind of the same thing, but we're like, Mom, but it's true. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be expensive. In fact, I really love shopping at consignment stores. It drives my kids crazy, but I really love consignment stores because then you find all these different unique pieces that you probably can't find at the stores because the stores are going to have just what's out right now. And so anyway, I think that's so good to think about all those different scriptures you just said and how God cares about these things. And another scripture that, that says, if he clothes the lilies of the field, and thinking about the flowers, how beautiful they are. Like, I think God is very creative and he is passionate about beauty. And so it's not about looking like a flower or being all the time beautiful, but just presenting ourselves in a way that we know that we're loved and we want to show other people that as well.
It's like if you had a queen, like let's say we lived in Europe and we had the monarchy, right? And we have queens or kings that run our nation. If they showed up wearing peasant clothing or in ripped clothing and sloppy, we would start to go, who's running our country? Like, they can't even keep themselves together. Can they keep our country together? Like it sends a message about you to the people who see you, and it makes you feel like they're being disrespected, But when you see them finely dressed, it gives you a sense of awe, like, right? And so when we dress like we're valuable, that doesn't mean I have to always be dressed fancy, but that I'm dressed like I respect myself with my modesty as well as with what I'm choosing to wear.
That's so good. I love that. What is something that you learned about your relationship with God through this process of fashion?
See, when I was growing up, my sisters, which they've both apologized, and so I can share this freely, but they used to make fun of me because I used to care enough to take the time to put myself together. And I'm sure in my growing up years, there was times when that was maybe to an extreme, like maybe I cared too much about how I looked. But they used to always tease me and be like, you're so vain. You're so materialistic. You're so this, you're so that. Just get over it. Just go without makeup. It's no big deal. And they would just tease me so much. But as I went on this journey and I realized like, hey, it's okay that I like to look nice. It's actually part of how I make God proud in that way, in that I'm taking care of myself. I'm being a good steward of my body and my health and the way that I look. And one of the leaders at my leadership school, he said, other people have to look at you. So when you put yourself together, you're actually respecting them.
That's true.
Because they don't have to look at you sloppy. And then you're kind of averting problems, because like if you always look so sloppy that people won't respect you, you might be missing out on opportunities. You might be missing out on people treating you respectfully or just taking you seriously. I mean, if you go to Walmart and you need help with something, and I've had both these experiences, I see the guy who's got the collared shirt tucked into his jeans, wearing a belt. He looks polished. He did his hair. I'm going to ask him my question because he looks like he's got his life together versus the person who's wrinkly and their clothes are stained and they don't fit right and they're all faded and their hair's a mess. You know what I mean? I'm going to go ask the guy who looks like he's got his life together. And so I feel like it just validated for me my desire to take care of myself in that regard. And it kind of broke off some of those lies and maybe even shame that I carried for a while.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. I think when I was interviewing my friend Molly, who's a professional organizer, and she talked about when she was a kid and how people were like, why do you love to do that so much? And she's like, this is how God made me. And it made me to pay attention to these things. And so now I can enjoy it now. Whereas a kid, it was probably something that she wasn't quite sure of. So I think that's so good that we shake off the lies and we just stay focused on who God made us to be. And yes, staying put together is a good thing. I think too, when I see someone, like if someone missed a button on their shirt, or when someone is, wearing two different shoes, or maybe they have stained clothing or whatever, and they're trying to stand up and speak and share a message, it's hard to pay attention. And, because I want to help them, like, not because I'm mad at them or I'm like, ew, gross, but it's just like, I need to go help that person. I'm not focused on what they're saying. I'm focused on, okay, I need to go and let them know they have toilet paper sticking out of the back of their shoe or, or whatever.
Yeah. One thing I like to say, which when I've taught classes on this, I'll mention this to them, is that your clothing is like the billboard that tells people about you without you even saying a word. And to us, that may not feel fair. Like, people are just judging me without even giving me a chance. I get it. But fundamentally, that's just how our brains are built. You're subconsciously taking in so much information from your surroundings in so many directions that people just unintentionally, unconsciously, they pull in and they create assumptions based on what they see. That's just part of the survival instinct that God built into our bodies, you know? And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, now you don't want it to be the final say. Like, I'm not going to let someone's clothing cause me to not recognize maybe the wisdom that they have to offer, you know, or the anointing of God on their life. I'm not going to let their clothing have the final say, but it still impacts how we view people, whether we like it or not. And so if you, by recognizing that, we can say, well, then I'll use that to my advantage, and I will make sure that the way I'm dressed tells the world who I am. So like, one thing that's a standard for myself is that I just don't wear bikinis when I'm on the beach or when I'm swimming and stuff. I don't have a conviction where I think it's evil. Just for me, I could never get past the barrier in my head that I'm like, but what if by wearing this, you know, people then see me on my podcast and I'm a voice that represents the word of God. And they're like, I just saw her on the beach in a crazy bikini. I don't think I trust what she's saying anymore, you know? And so I just feel like I don't want to dress in a way that's going to discredit what my life represents, you know? And that's because our clothing and what we wear is like a billboard to the world around us, even if they never meet us. And so I don't let it become like a cage I have to live in, but I'm just mindful of what I'm choosing representing who I am to the world around me.
That's really good. I love that. A billboard. This is just portraying who I am, and we want it to say good things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jenilee, this has been so good. I've learned so much, and I've really enjoyed having you on the show today. So thank you so much for being here. Before I let you go, I always like to ask my guests to tell me a memory from when they were a kid. So do you have a memory in mind you want to share?
I mean, since we're coming up on Halloween, I shared this with you earlier. When I was a kid, we weren't allowed to celebrate Halloween. And I think there was one Halloween that my parents were gone and they left us with my aunt. And my aunt, they celebrated Halloween. They loved it. And so I think they got permission from my parents to like take us trick-or-treating or something. And I remember getting really excited about what costume I was going to wear. And but I had never gone trick-or-treating, so I didn't know what to expect. And so I think with her help, I think we just decided to do something simple. And I was like a cat or something. So I had like my little cat ears on a headband. And I remember my little nose was black and I had whiskers, and I think she even made my lips pink or something, and I might have had a tail, I don't know, but I just remember I felt really cute and like in my little kitty costume, and I felt kind of like meow, you know. And so but I remember when we were trick-or-treating that I was scared to death of all the big tall boys in their scary costumes. And I remember being like, I don't know if I like this trick-or-treating thing after all. So that was the only time I did it. And I was like, okay, I've had the experience, but I'm not missing out on anything.
There you go. That's good. When I was growing up, we had a fall festival at our church. And so we had to dress like Bible characters. So people took that and ran with it. So some people did dress up like Bible characters, but a lot of people were like Superman from the Bible, you know?
Oh.
But I think every year I was an animal, like no matter what it was, like I'm a butterfly from Noah's Ark. I'm a cat from Noah's Ark. So we were always animals for whatever that was.
Well, at least Noah's Ark gave you lots of options to work with.
That's right. You can be creative with that. Yeah. They had this animal on Noah's Ark. So that's good. That's so fun. Well, thank you so much for being here. Tell our listeners how they can learn about your podcast.
Oh, sure. So if they want to connect with me, if you're interested in my styling stuff, I actually do have a short online course. It's like 2 hours from a workshop I taught live, where I teach all the fundamentals and essentials around learning your body shape, learning your colors, learning your style, and how to put it all together. And so that's available. I think if you go to jsamuelstyling.com, that's just J and then Samuel is my last name, styling.com. They can do that if they want to check that out. Otherwise, my podcast is called Java with Jen, also Hearing God's Voice for Everyday Life. And so if they want to check that out, you can just search Java with Jen on any podcast platform and it should pull me up and you can listen there.
Well, thank you so much for doing this today. This was so fun.
You're welcome. It was good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wow, Jenilee gave us such great information, so much good advice. I love when she said we need to dress for our personality first. Trends come and go, but wearing something that makes you feel comfortable and confident, that's the most important thing. She also said the way you dress affects how you think and perform. Isn't that fascinating? And it also sends a message about how you respect yourself to the people who see you. And it's interesting that your clothes can show that you respect other people too. I love when she said, your clothing is like the billboard that tells people about you without you saying a word. So much to think about the next time I get dressed. If you'd like to learn more about Jenilee and her styling, you can go to jsamuelstyling.com. You can also check out her podcast, Java with Jen, wherever you get your podcasts. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So here is my friend Hannah.
Hi, my name is Hannah, and this is my joke. Knock, knock. Who's there? Which who? Which way to the pumpkin patch? Thank you.
Which way to the pumpkin patch? That was awesome, Hannah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Hey, if you would like to be like Hannah and share your favorite joke or a Bible verse or a quote that you like from a book or movie, you can head over to my website, collidekidspodcast.com, and click the tab at the top that says Kids Only, or you can find information about how to send it to me through my social media. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod, and I would love for you to follow me there. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a few ways you can do that by following and subscribing to this podcast and leaving a rating and review. You can also share this episode with friends and family and let them know why you and your family like to listen. Well, I hope that you guys have an amazing week. And if you are going trick-or-treating tomorrow, I hope you get lots of really good candy, but don't eat it all in one sitting. Well, in case no one has told you today, I would love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.